Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei L. Bob. I am your sensei, your griot, here to tell you a story. This channel is just for entertainment's sake. It does not pretend to know anything. There is no such thing within this channel's construct as a belief structure. Whatever we talk about is just for entertainment's sake, laughs and giggles. Because the only thing that is real, the only thing that exists is love's co-creation. So, let's see what the radio has to say. Do-do-do-do. Stuart Brand.
Building a clock to ring once a century and keep time with 10,000 years.
Humanity has left itself into a pathologically short attention span and to not think about long ranges of time. It's at best a waste and at worst an extreme hazard.
So today on the show, Stuart Brand, a conversation with a controversial cult figure who's always getting at where society is going next and has some big, some say crazy, ideas about where it should be going. Stuart, welcome to the TED Radio Hour.
Thank you.
I want to start by asking you, you have lived an incredible life, but let's go back to the beginning. Tell us a bit about where you grew up. Rockford, Illinois. Did you have visions of what you would be when you grew up?
Yeah, I knew I was going to be a veterinarian. I was the guy that everybody brought injured or young, abandoned wildland.
So this is TED Talks.
Oh, and did your parents support that endeavor, or were
And
they
that's Stuart Brand.
horrified?
Oh,
Your phone will be out of storage. Clean up now. Storage full. Click clean now. Your phone runs slow. Because you don't have this app. It will.
All of my electronics is doing that. It's wanting to be rebranded, remolded, assimilated, re-Googled. And, I'll do it tomorrow. Oh, let's see. Let's see. So did any of you watch yesterday's show? Oh, here's Kim.
Excuse me, what kind of car do you drive?
What?
Vladimir Putin announced the mobilization of 300,000 reservists to fight in the war with Ukraine. He also announced referendums to join the Russian Federation to take place in several Russian-occupied territories of Ukraine, the Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. And Western media reports the voting is a sham, with people being held at gunpoint. There have also been reports of widespread demonstrations in Moscow and around Russia, protesting against the war, and reports of men fleeing the country. However, reports from Russian sources and within Ukraine tell a different story. So here to tell us what she's been seeing and hearing in Moscow is Fiorella Isabel, journalist with RT, and you may know her from the Convo Couch. Fee, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kim. I'm excited.
So what are you hearing from what's going on in Moscow? I mean, I've been hearing, of course, here in Western media, we hear widespread protests, people rising up against Putin, up against the war. I do know some people in Russia that are not in the news. They're not media, they're not journalists, they're not political in any way, and they're saying, yeah, there were some, but there was way bigger demonstrations in support. But they're saying, yes, there are men fleeing the country. So, I mean, what's going on from your perspective in Moscow? What are you hearing and seeing?
Right. So, like your friend said, basically there is a lot of there was, as soon as this came out, there was a little bit of fear as to what this meant. Really, a lot of people, though, mostly came out in support into the streets, and there are countless videos I've been sharing. 50,000 people showed up in the center of Moscow at Red Square to support the referendums and stand in solidarity with the people who want to join from the Donetsk People's Republic, the Luhansk republics, and also, of course, the cities of Kherson and Zaporozhye regions. And there's just so many other territories that want to join Russia. Now, there were counter protests. They were a lot smaller in numbers, and it's usually the same people that have been supportive of the Alex Navalny, U.S.-backed sort of, more, I would say, liberal type of people that tend to support, and they reside in Moscow. There's a lot of them in Moscow, especially because Moscow is a very, it's a capitalist area. It's an area that has a lot of Western interaction with a lot of the corporations that were here. So you have that as well. But majorly, you had so many Moscovites go out and show up in support of the referendum. Now, there were people fleeing in the beginning, some mostly men, because they were afraid of being drafted. And I can explain more on the draft in a second, but it's mandatory in Russia, so everybody knows, to serve 1 year of military for men, right? But this has always been the case. It's been the case for a long time. It used to be 2 years, and it's 1. And basically, that doesn't mean that you go into battle. It could be you're just serving, doing whatever duty in whatever field. It's not like you have to go fight in a war or anything for a year. So just to clarify that as well. And like I said, most people in Russia have various opinions on Vladimir Putin. However, people outside of Moscow themselves have been largely more in support of the special military operation.
Good day. As I've discussed in my previous videos, we are in a quiet before the storm situation in terms of the Ukrainian conflict. The various battle fronts seem to be largely stable. Ukraine continues to try and launch attacks in various directions, but so far it's failing to make any progress with respect to them at all. There is one exception where Ukraine continues to make a major effort, and that is against this town of Krasny Liman and this area in northern Donetsk, which I'm going to discuss shortly. But everywhere else, Zaporozhye region, Kherson region, I won't say things are quiet. Fighting continues there all the time. The information suggests, by the way, that Ukraine is suffering heavy losses, and I'm going to come to that shortly. But there doesn't seem to be any indication of any imminent breakthroughs or changes of position. The only area, as I've said, is northern Donetsk, where the Ukrainians seem to be continuing this effort to capture the town of Krasny Liman. Now, I said previously that this is the quiet before the storm. We have confirmation from the Kremlin, from Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesman, that as soon as the 4 regions that are now voting to join Russia are admitted into the Russian Federation, the legal position of the special military operation changes immediately, and the constitution of the Russian Federation comes into effect. There's been some suggestions that this is how things might start to shape out. In the event that all 4 regions vote to join Russia, which is a certainty, Putin will, the Duma and the Federal Assembly will pass the relevant laws. Putin will probably confirm his agreement to those laws on the 30th of September, when it's widely believed that he's going to address the Russian Parliament, the Federal Assembly. And then forces of the Russian regular army will start to enter these regions in large numbers. And let me stress again, these are probably already existing forces which have been earmarked for this purpose. They're probably not going to be drawn from these reservists that are being called up at the moment. Now, if you remember some weeks ago, all kinds of rumors about major Russian buildups, about large tank forces being assembled near Kharkiv region on the Russian side of the border, large deployments in Crimea, lots of military activity, and we didn't hear much more about that. And since these were all rumors, we have no way of knowing clearly whether or not that is true or not. But I'm going to make a suggestion, which is that if those rumors are true, then those major troop movements that we were hearing about were initiated even as the plans to call these referendums and perhaps to announce this mobilization, this partial mobilization, were being debated and discussed before the final decision was made to push forward with this idea. In the aftermath of Ukraine's Kharkiv offensive and after the discussions, the negotiations which took place in Samarkand. So I suspect that those forces probably are there and they probably will be moved into Donbass and these other regions, exactly as these suggestions which I'm seeing floating around the Russian media are suggesting. Then there will probably be some form of ultimatum, some sort of demand to Ukraine to pull its forces out of these regions, out of Donbass, out of Zaporozhye. I will be interested to see whether that includes Zaporozhye city, but I suspect that it will. And then when Ukraine rejects that demand or ultimatum, as it must do, then we will start to see a much more extensive, much more powerful Russian military campaign being initiated, which will probably continue for several weeks and months, but which will really gain traction and momentum after the autumn rains and the hardening of the roads and the fields following the winter frosts. Now, Gilbert Doctorow, one of the most astute observers of Russian affairs, and somebody who is, by the way, based in Russia itself, has recently written a blog piece in which he says that the word which is circulating is in Russia is that the Kremlin aims to have this war completed by the 31st of December. Well, we've seen many dates floating around. I don't know whether that's possible or not. I suspect to some extent it depends on what the West does in response to all these moves. At the moment, by the way, the West isn't doing very much of anything. But regardless, we will see. But if you remember, in one of my videos, I think it was the one I did yesterday, I did say that perhaps, possibly, the Russians would be looking to have some sort of decisive outcome in Ukraine by midwinter, and that would correlate reasonably well with this 31st of December date.
If you thought the president was crazy for giving out $10,000 in student loan forgiveness, wait until you hear this. The government has been handing out money to desperate Americans.
Welcome to Eagle Claw Channel. Sudden counterattacks of the Ukrainian armed forces shattered the Russian army. The echoes of the disintegrated Russian army, on the other hand, affected Moscow. The Russian Federation is in total hell, while Putin is calling for mobilization. But the operations of the Ukrainian armed forces continue on the occupied Ukrainian territory. Ukraine's chief of staff, Valery Zaluzhny, made fun of Putin's decision to mobilize, saying that they have finished with the professional Russian army, and now it's the turn of the amateurs. Russia looks devastated not only in terms of the number of soldiers, but also in terms of war equipment. Russian users are sharing videos on social media of moldy AK-47 Kalashnikov assault rifles that they claim were distributed to mobilized Russian soldiers. The drones Russia bought from Iran also prove that the Russian army's need for high-tech equipment is deplorable. Let's make a definition about Iran's role in high-tech military production. China produces copies of Western high-tech military equipment. Worse than that, Iran is trying to produce even more vulgar copies of military equipment copied from China's Western counterparts. Now Russia is in need of help of the poorest copies of military technology, like Iran and North Korea. This proves how effective Western sanctions are. One of the biggest reasons for Russia's falling into this situation is the Kraken, special unit of the Ukrainian Special Forces. The Russian army was expelled from Kharkiv and parts of Donbass and settled in Donbass, especially after the last all-out counterattack by the Ukrainian army. The raids of the Ukrainian Special Forces of the Ukrainian Armed Forces against the established Russian army in Donbass have also hardened. The latest published reports show us that the Russian army was defeated even in the areas it considers safe. In the latest report, it was stated that Ukraine's Special Operations Forces destroyed an enemy surveillance post in the direction of Bakhmut. Special Operations Forces of Ukraine worked delicately in the direction of Bakhmut. With a targeted anti-tank guided missile attack, the operators destroyed a surveillance post of Russian invaders. It had struck 11 enemy personnel and military equipment clusters of the Ukrainian Air Force in the same area the other day. Ukrainian anti-aircraft defense units destroyed Russia's Su-25 aircraft, guided aircraft missile, and 3 unmanned aerial vehicles in different directions. This shows us that the Russian army is not comfortable either on land or in the air. It was stated that the Special Operations Forces, which attacked in the direction of Bakhmut, is a unit of Ukraine's Kraken unit. Kraken Regiment is a Ukrainian military volunteer unit, established on February 24, 2022. The same day as Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The regiment, named after the legendary sea creature, was founded by the veterans of the Azak Regiment. It became one of the most high-profile volunteer units in the war when the Kraken Regiment successfully liberated several occupied villages during the war. Like the Azov Regiment, the Kraken Regiment has been the subject of controversy surrounding the recruitment of fighters from far-right groups, but the unit's soldiers dismissed the claim as Russian propaganda. Unit commanders acknowledged that it was possible for far-right individuals to join the regiment, but said such individuals were not outnumbered in a diverse group formed to defend Ukraine. It stated that the unit is not actually affiliated with the Ukrainian Armed Forces, but carries out its operations.
The Tennessee Constitutional Division of 2021 has
I saw the point of red in our terrace balcony, who transferred to in the wall of our room and in the direction and of me, and with information from Christa Grozev and with the information about the last some days, I very good understand that it's the more.
I don't remember a lot in the immediate days after surgery because I lost so much blood and I was in consciousness all the time. I was hallucinating a lot, seeing really crazy things in the room, and
Good morning, folks. It's Diamond with the Oppenheimer Ranch Project, Magnetic Reversal News, and Shinrin Yoku, bringing you a grand solar minimum update Monday, September 26, around noontime, Mountain Time, 2022. Jupiter will shine tonight. It is the closest approach since 1963. That is Jupiter's opposition, and we'll get to that as snow is showing up in the models. But the big story, Hurricane Ian developed overnight and is now powering up right off of Cuba and the Cayman Islands. Keep calm. It's boom time. Hurricane Ian reached hurricane strength overnight and could become a catastrophic Cat 4 storm. Evacuations are beginning in Florida. We have the latest spaghetti models coming up. It looks like ground zero is somewhere between Tampa and a very unpopulated portion of Florida, which is good news. And landfall is only going to be about Cat 1 because this is going to weaken as it goes up the coast. The major effects will be in the Tampa Clearwater area because this is where the strongest winds, the closest the storm will approach to Florida. So heads up if you're in Clearwater. And you can see here the spaghetti models all lining up with that Clearwater area. About 80% probability that is the position of the storm. Still a wide breadth of probabilities, but look at how many of these models are all lining up on this bullseye. That being said, the southeast of the U.S. should also prepare for some catastrophic flooding rain up in the southern Appalachians and up through Georgia. So heads up for those regions. Let's check out the National Hurricane Center here. Hurricane Ian Advisory number 14, the most recent update. Winds just increased 5 miles per hour in the last hour, and it is increasing rapidly. Let's run this through so you can see what happened overnight. Take a look at the size of the storm and watch its width increase as the sun rises. That storm becomes the entire size of the state of Florida. There's Ian, and there's Florida. So this is a gigantic storm that is going to intensify. It's going to move over the mountains of Cuba and weaken here, and then it will re-intensify to Cat 4 here by 6 p.m. Tuesday. By that time, it's going to be Cat 4 this whole time, and it could potentially bring some amazing amounts of rain to the Florida Keys, so heads up if you're in those regions, and we'll have a much better picture by Tuesday of where exactly this baby is going to hit. Now, here is the current cone of probabilities from the National Hurricane Center. They have a little different picture than our spaghetti models, but it's showing that this is going to make landfall somewhere up in a very unpopulated portion near Destin, Florida, I believe is up there. Don't quote me on that, but it's literally in point with hitting Gainesville if it goes on shore here. So Gainesville is in the center of the state. It'll be a much weakened tropical depression at that point, or tropical storm as showing here. So Gainesville, Florida is not going to really receive the brunt of this. Anything on the western edge would be heavy rain. So this is Fort Myers and south. I'd be worried in your region for some heavy rain bands, persistent, lasting for 36 hours or more. And that could bring 8-10 inches of rain to your region. And that is when everything fills up and the catastrophic flooding occurs. So be prepared to get out of harm's way if you're by the coast. And my thoughts and prayers going out to my brother who's right down there in the Fort Myers region. Talked to him the other day. He is prepared. Now, all eyes are on Hurricane Ian, which became a hurricane early this morning in the western Caribbean Sea and may become a major hurricane tonight near western Cuba. We're going to keep a close eye on it for you. Stay tuned for updates. Now, regardless of Ian's track, I apologize for the phone.
For just $67, you can make as many videos as you want, and you never need to pick up a camera or use any fancy editing software.
Apologize for the phone. Okay, we're back. Now, regardless of Ian's track and intensity over the next several days, life-threatening storm surge, hurricane force winds, and heavy rain, flooding, and tornadoes are just some of the impacts the Sunshine State will see. So be prepared if you're on the West Coast. There's warnings and watches coming up right now with backup power, water, food, and a bug-out plan. If you're by the coast and it's looking to come hit you, go inland and stay in a shelter or stay with some friends. Don't make the stupid decision to ride out the storm like you're some kind of hero. Here we are at the GFS model showing snow coming in 2 waves. We have an initial blast here that's going to make its way into the Rockies Saturday, October 1st. So just at the turn of the season, it looks like the first blast of snow in the snowpack is going to be coming. And then the models are just showing it, well, it's continuous after that. Winter has begun. Greenland also gained more record snow and ice over the weekend. We've been reporting on that. And early this morning, Cap Allen put this out, which showed that Greenland's ice sheet was gaining even more. And he claimed 8 gigatons of gain on Friday. Well, he captured that before the actual finish of the day. And we actually finished on...
The psychologist Dr. Jordan Peterson is one of the world's most fascinating and controversial intellectuals. His books sell by the boatload. He's talked back theatres across the globe. Millions watch him online. When he speaks, people listen. I interviewed him earlier today at length, and we'll air most of that conversation next week. But on the day that Putin threatened nuclear war on the West, I had to ask Jordan Peterson for his analysis on the war in Ukraine. His response was as grave as it was startling. That's the world's most famous psychologist, and began by asking for his view on Vladimir Putin as a man.
Well, he's a lot more like everybody else than anyone thinks. You know, the notion that he's Hitler or Stalin, that's just foolish. I don't see any evidence for that at all. I mean, first of all, Hitler and Stalin were very singular types, and there's a bit of Hitler and Stalin in everyone. So, you know, there's some truth in that. Maybe there's more in the typical Russian leader.
A bit of Hitler in everyone? Really?
There's more than a bit.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, well, why would have Nazism spread the way it did? You know, people think, well, that's all top down. It's not top down. There's a part of people that are all these people who informed on Kate Berbelsing.
Well, didn't Goebbels say that the way to get vast numbers of people to go along with what you want to do is to terrify them? You
could
hold
do that.
a grip of terror over them.
Oh yeah, but
and in a way, that's what Putin's now doing with the Russian people, where he's going back now into a position of they're all trying to get us, they want to attack us, they want to take us over. He's terrifying his people to rally support for what at the moment is a conflict he has started, which is not going the way he assumed.
Well, the most, what would you say, the wisest commentators on totalitarian states, like Solzhenitsyn, and many psychological commentators, Jung was a good example of that, made a very straightforward case that you can't have a totalitarian state unless every single person is willing to lie about everything all the time. And you can think about that as top down because the leaders lie too. And they also enforce punishments if you don't lie. But then you can also think about it. The totalitarian spirit is replicated at every level of the society. And so in a truly totalitarian state, husbands lie to their wives and parents lie to their children. And the totalitarian state is actually the grip of the lie. And so, and people will certainly go along with that. I mean we're seeing that emerge here with cancel culture. It's like lie or else.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, well.
And the Russian people will be bombarded all the time with state media propaganda and will be buying into a lot of what Putin is saying.
Yeah.
How does this war end, do you think?
We're going to find out this winter. Well, I know what I would do in his shoes. I'd wait till the first cold snap and shut off the taps.
Right.
Well,
because
of course he's going to do that.
He's got the control over the energy.
Of course he's going to do that. He's already warned the West with his insistence that maintenance problems were necessary and the pipelines had to be shut down.
Do you think he will use a nuclear weapon?
If necessary, he'll use a tactical battlefield weapon.
Even if it starts World War III?
It won't. Probably.
Why? Because we wouldn't respond.
What's in it for us?
If you let him do it and get away with it, where does that end? Then you are into a hit.
Well, look, there's a lot. You can get yourself in a situation, no problem, where there's no good outcome. We're trying to do that right now on every front we can possibly imagine. We can easily get ourselves in a situation where it's hell this way and hell that way. That's highly probable.
But should the Ukrainians give the Russians anything? When I was over there recently interviewing President Zelensky, what I was struck by was everybody I met in Kyiv, the capital city, were utterly resolute. Don't give them an inch of our land.
Yeah, well, I can't speak to that because I don't know what the preconditions for peace might be. But I do know that naive notions that the Russians are going to lose somehow, or that we're going to win, I just don't understand. I don't understand that. Well, what do you mean we're going to win? What are we going to win here exactly?
Well, I guess a victory would be that the Russians retreated from Ukraine.
With Ukrainian ruins.
Right.
Well, okay, fine. That's a hell of a victory. Like, I think Putin could manage that because I think he could tell his people, and I think they might buy it. It's like, we accomplished our objective. We devastated Ukraine and we kept it out of the hands of the West. And that's not great. It's not what we'd hoped for, but it's better than the alternative. And I think they would buy that. And I think when Putin went into Ukraine, I thought a bunch of things, which I made a YouTube video about that. People criticized like mad. I thought, okay, well, what's happening here? Oh, I see. His end game for failure is that Ukraine is left in a smoking ruin. Oh, that's a victory. So then he can lose with impunity.
Right.
So how can we win? We can't win against Vladimir Putin anyways, because you cannot win against someone you cannot say no to. Period. And we can't say no to Putin because we sold our soul for his oil and gas. And we did that to elevate our moral stature in relationship to saving the planet. And so here we are, facing a very dire winter, hoisted on the petard of our own foolishness and moral presumption. We're saving the planet. We'll see. I don't think so. It doesn't look like it to me. And this is the most catastrophic issue here. Assuming that we're facing an environmental crisis of planetary proportions, which is not something I buy, by the way. Assuming we are, well, then I would imagine that you would put in place measures that would ameliorate that problem instead of exacerbating it. But all the measures you're putting in place are actually making the environmental problem worse. So how is that even vaguely acceptable? And I look at that and I think, oh, I see. It's just like George Orwell said about middle-class socialists 50 years ago. It's not that you love the planet, it's that you hate humanity. So, well, have at her, boys and girls, and we'll see what happens this winter. And it's very terrifying to me, especially here, because your energy prices have gone way out of control, and that's going to hurt a lot of poor people, and certainly around the world as well. The World Bank already estimated that we've put 350 million people into what they call food insecurity. 350 million. That's 3 times as many as the communists managed to kill. Maybe we can manage that in a winter. But the planet has too many people on it anyway, so, that's just poor people.
Drinking warm water before bed reverses tooth and...
So, I didn't say any of that. Don't believe a word I say because I didn't say anything, right? I'm not saying anything mean or bad or conspiratorial. I just played the news, right? And I had a how to be happy : how free are you? And I just asked a few questions, and they took that down, saying that it was inappropriate. So, I have to say, YouTube, Mr. Google, Alphabet City, thanks for giving me 1 million thumbs up, right? And now all of my Google motifs are not wanting to be happy. So, I suggest you guys go to my channel, Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob, and go through my 1,500 to 2,000 shows and do it like a dartboard. Just kind of, zing, boo, 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 stop at a show and take a look at it for a second or two. If it's interesting, download it, do it again. Do 5 shows a day, right? And look at the titles. The titles have something to do with the show. I mean, I never understood how to do a title that was supposed to get the attention of the algorithm. I never quite understood that, or any of it really. And so see, we're out in space right now, and that is Earth down below us, right? And we're above North Africa, and food desert. So it's going to be interesting, and hopefully, where I'm at right now, the folks from Florida, but they saw me with a coat on. Oh man, they're running around with a t-shirt. I like it when it's cold like this. Well, it's good. So I'm old. I don't want to catch a, as my mother would say, the croup. And so, so I've been doing laundry and fixing things and preparing for winter. And it's all as it should be, right? So, what time is it now? I got 64%. It's 5:17, and so let's go back to what the thread has to say. So it's going to be interesting to see what the China's property market is now a giant Ponzi scheme. Well, it already was. It never was anything but. Poland president, blah, 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 on Russia war in Ukraine. Oh, let's see what he has to say.
Ukraine's largest neighbor on its western border is Poland, NATO, and European Union. President Biden rebuked Russia and Vladimir Putin in notable remarks at the United Nations General. Ukraine's largest neighbor on its western border is Poland, a NATO and European Union member that has had its own long and violent history with Russia. As Vladimir Putin looks to accelerate the war, I sat down in New York early this afternoon with Poland's president, Andrzej Duda. President Duda, thank you very much for talking with us. Let's start with Ukraine. You've just listened to President Biden's remarks at the United Nations, where he said what President Putin has done in taking over territory that doesn't belong to him, and now with this overt threat of nuclear weaponry, that it should make our blood run cold. Is that how you take what's going on?
Russia is in a difficult situation. Russia has demonstrated its weakness. What Russia has been doing so far in Ukraine, the aggression, and all the outrageous dimensions of the war which Russia demonstrated in Ukraine, as a matter of fact, have turned out to be a failure of Russia. Russia tries to change its tactics at the same time it tries to threaten the world with nuclear weapons.
How does the statement from President Putin that he is going to mobilize up to hundreds of thousands more troops to fight this war, that he's in this for the long haul, how does that change the war right now?
Proszę pamiętać, że Please bear in mind that at the beginning, before the war happened, the experts were saying it would be enough for Russia to conquer the whole of Ukraine within 72 hours. However, they failed to seize the whole of Ukraine. You can see an attempt to save face in this mobilization, this partial mobilization, which was announced in Russia. Well, it causes a horror among his society because thousands of Russian soldiers have already died in Ukraine. There will be further thousands following. This is going to be the policy of the Russian authorities right now, so we can see a weakness of Russia in this respect.
So are you saying, you keep referring to weakness, are you saying that the rest of the world should not take his threat seriously when he says we're prepared to use all means necessary, and clearly they have an enormous nuclear arsenal?
Strategically, what may happen, and Poland being the largest neighbor on Ukraine and also on Russia's border, and it is one of the major access points where Ukraine is getting its weapons. And we have only given Ukraine somewhere between 16 and 20 HIMARS, and they have been doing a number on Russia's army and their supply points, right? What if we give them another 20 or 40 or 50, right? Open security, privacy, no. See, Google is interrupting right here. I don't want to open up that, right? But does it give me a way to say no? I don't know. No. Let's see what I look like on the other end. Mm-hmm. There I am. Says I'm live, but I'm not moving. And It's not saying what's it's the Google Drive for desktop needs approval to update this software needed to load your files stored in Google Drive. To approve, open system, security, and privacy. Click down below. But I don't understand what it's going to do, so I'm not just going to click down below. So we've been doing this for 40 minutes and 35 seconds, so I think I might just say I'll see you tomorrow.